attempted to create some sort of reference to why they're more than a drug, they're more than something to take at the party, that they can be a medicine that a person, if they feel called to it, can choose to use to explore themselves and to heal their wounds. When I was 23 years old, I left Canada for the first time to adventure as a backpacker to Australia. I grew up in a really beautiful home with two great parents that did a lot for me, and ultimately I felt as though it was time for me to find something grander than what my now growing city, but the city that I'm from, had to offer me. When I left for Australia, I started pushing my boundaries in new ways that I didn't understand. I got to Melbourne sick, like in my stomach and in my heart and in my mind, and met up with a friend that was down there who introduced me to some people he knew that took me into their life, some pretty well dialed in Melbourne artist kids. And it was in that community that I had my first mature psychedelic experience, having entered it recognizing like these are tools for expanding the mind, tools for exploring the self. And in that journey, I had this realization that I was perpetuating my own problems, and that I was maintaining a narrative that was causing me to feel in a way that was limiting me and limiting my experience. And I knew that I couldn't be the James that I thought I was in Canada. I needed to be the James that I could be in Australia.
The first exposure I had to magic mushrooms was when I was 14, and a friend of mine had started talking about it. I didn't end up actually taking them till like 3 years later because they're incredibly difficult for me to find. The first time that I took it was very interesting. I talk about it in the book. I didn't realize the implications of the experience. I just felt completely overwhelmed.
Even when I was in Melbourne and being destructive and reckless and ultimately playful, with my psychedelic usage, I had an understanding that there was something special about mushrooms, that it was a spiritual experience, but I didn't fully integrate the implications of that. I didn't really understand what that meant.
The shift for me from viewing the mushrooms as something of a party drug to something of a more spiritually minded, plant medicine came after I found myself really intensely aware of my destructive habits in Melbourne. And seems almost counterproductive, but I ended up removing all the things I felt like I was consuming in my life. Obviously drugs and alcohol, coffee, ganja, women, food. I made myself sick on a fast, and also socializing. And I went out into the middle of the Always National Park and took several grams of mushrooms and stayed there for 2 nights by myself to contemplate, my relationship to people and to myself. And it was that experience that really showed me how much of an integrator and how much of a healing tool they are.
How do you go into a totally new and novel area of your mind and come back and try to communicate that to somebody? I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that in a way that I felt best described what was happening in my psychology from a somewhat stepped back perspective.
I wouldn't go as far as to attribute the positive changes in myself to the mushroom alone. They played a valuable part, but they weren't the reason so much as they were just a means to better understanding my choices.
Decomposing the shadow is my attempt at creating like an external representation of the mind of a person on psilocybin mushrooms seeking psychological and emotional healing. The purpose of this campaign is to fund a book tour through the Western Canadian Festival circuit and across 4 major cities. I want to get out there and share my vision of the mushroom. I want to get out there and share the premise of this book and share the implications it's had in my life in the hopes that it can help other people take this substance out of the party and bring it into an element of their lives that is founded on personal growth and discovery rather than just novel experiences and tripping out. I want to share my passion with the mushroom with as many people as possible in hopes of re-sanctifying it to the sacred medicine it was once known and respected as.